DiCaprio. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Congratulations, first up, on this, which has become, as we speak, the #2 movie of all time on Netflix, headed for #1. People are watching it, Adam, and that's got to make you really happy, because this is a movie with a message which sometimes can make people go away, but it's a message told in a very entertaining way.
Yeah, it's been really cool. It was a movie we made to be a world movie. We wanted people, after the last 5 or 10 years, which have been borderline traumatic for a lot of us, to be able to gather around something and laugh and feel big feelings about this crazy world that we're living in. So, when it premiered on Netflix, to see that just, huge flow of responses to it was really thrilling.
Which they told me before we went on, the combined number of those actors with their SAG nominations is something like 62 altogether. Leo, you've had 12 for many movies that we've seen. I'm wondering what drew you to this particular movie at this time in your career, and why you wanted to make it.
Well, I'd say first off, that's a bit of an unfair assessment, seeing that we have Meryl Streep in our cast. So. Most people don't have that advantage.
You do.
What drew me to this project? Everything. Adam, the cast, but there are very few opportunities in life where you can be in a film that's really a lightning rod for a communal worldwide anxiety. I was watching the Charlie Chaplin documentary the other day, and the whole section on the great dictator and what that must have been like, doing a dark comedy during the height of what was going on in Europe. And I feel like I had been looking and searching for something that related to the climate crisis. It's nearly an impossible task to create drama and tension with a subject matter that unfolds throughout decades and is a slow burn, no pun intended. But Adam really cracked the code and created a sense of urgency, but bringing in politics, social media, the scientific community all in one, that was a parable for not only the climate crisis, but what we were going through at that particular moment, which was, COVID raging throughout the world. And we shot this film right in the height of COVID altogether. And it was probably one of the most unforgettable, unique experiences of art, combining with real life tension that I've ever had in my life. So I'm just so proud to be a part of it. And I'm so proud that so many people have been creating a dialogue from this movie. That's really what our intention was, and what Adam's intention was by writing this story. And it's actually happening. So I have to say, I'm just so excited that people are conversing about it, because the whole world feels this sense of tension about this issue.
Yeah, I think, Adam, the idea, the hook of a comet coming is just brilliant, because it lures you into this story, and then you realize what it's really about. Because like I mentioned to you before we went on, when I talked to you a few years ago and I said, what are you going to do next? You said, I want to do something about climate change.
Yeah, that was one of the things, is if you really think about the climate crisis, you could even jump to, like Leo said, COVID. You could jump to the gun violence epidemic in the US, the opioid epidemic, income inequality. Really, the movie is not about the climate crisis. It is, but it's about our almost comical inability to respond to it. It would be fully comical if it wasn't so horrifying and devastating. And really, what it is like Leo said, where climate change is so slow moving and vast, it's hard for us to get our head around it. But kind of all you need to know is, if we don't act on it in the next 5, 6, 7 years, or even right now, we're in a lot of trouble. I was telling you, and Leo, I didn't get a chance to tell you this. I had my home insurance canceled yesterday. And the reason is because of the climate. And actuaries are not willing to take a bet that my home is not going to burn down or flood. that's not me playing a sob story for myself. It's just showing what a reality it's become. So yeah, we felt like the comet would kind of make that part of it clear, but still the center stage of the whole movie is about our bumbling, self-centered, careerist, prophetized reaction to the greatest challenge we've ever faced.
And blame it on climate change, because that's a very interesting thing if that's happening now too. Leo, I have to ask you about your character here, Dr. Mindy. He is so unique, yet I've seen since the movies come out, real people having breakdowns on television trying to explain this. This is not fiction here. This is actually happening to people like that character you play.
To Adam's point too, is as much as this plot, using the symbol of a comet hitting planet Earth within an 8-month time period, gives the movie this incredible sense of tension and urgency. It's not that far off from reality. The truth is we have to make profound changes in the private sector and from a government standpoint within the next half a decade. Otherwise, we are facing catastrophic and irreparable damage to this planet. So I was just thinking that as Adam was saying it. And yeah, having done multiple climate change documentaries and getting to have one-on-one interactions with a lot of these climate scientists, you feel this overwhelming sense of frustration from them. The fact that they're trying to articulate the science the best they can, and then they get caught into a political debate about whether or not 99% of the scientific community is correct or not. And people like Michael Mann, who have been ostracized ever since he came up with the hockey stick curve of where temperatures are going. I tried to emulate a lot of them, trying to play the game, the media game, and be savvy and at the same time communicate their lifelong findings and expertise on the subject matter. So that sort of network moment, as we call it, was something I was incredibly focused on, because in a lot of ways you feel that sense of frustration from the scientific community. And we're really at that point right now where we really need to cut through the BS and start talking about what the hell we're going to do as a worldwide community. And that was the thing about COVID. This is the first time we in my lifetime and many others, that we communally felt the same exact thing as a world community. And that's a rare thing. And that's what's going to happen with this issue. So, I could ramble on and on about this issue, but yeah, I really tried my best to emulate, along with Amy Meinzer, who was our resident astronomer and an expert on all things comet. She was also an avid environmentalist, and I tried to pull out of her in a lot of ways what she would do if she wanted to, cut through the fat of the sort of twisted media spin and scream at the public about the urgency of this issue.
Yeah. What I love too, they've seen the movie. I'm going to assume you've all seen the movie watching us right now. And if you haven't, shut your ears. But at the end, when everything's about to end and you're sitting at that dinner table and you're saying something to the degree of, look at what we had. And was that improvised, or how did that come about?
Well,
I'll brag on Leo a little bit here. We had this ending that was obviously scripted at the dinner table. And the line for me that was always so emotional was when Jen said, "At least we tried." And Leo came to me a couple times, and Leo's so rigorous with scripts. He has such a great antennae for where the character is, where the emotional through line is. And yet at the same time, he's so respectful of what you've written. So I really had a lot of satisfying, enjoyable conversations with Leo. And he kept saying, I feel like we need one more line at the end. And I was always like, yeah, if you come up with something, I kind of feel like it's more what's happening. So I'll never forget it. We're at this house outside Boston, and there's just been a huge snowstorm, and our video village is next to the house in the freezing cold. And Leo comes up to me and he says, I think I thought of the line. And he doesn't read it with emotion. He just says, what if it was something like, boy, we really did have it all, didn't we? And my tough Texas script supervisor, Kate Hardman, and I both teared up immediately. And we're like, yeah, that's it. And then he said it at the table, and it was like you just saw the shock waves hit all the actors. So I don't think Leo would brag to that degree, but I'm going to give him all the credit for that line. The only thing I did was, not be enough of an egomaniac to get in the way of it. So that's my little tiny brag around it.
I have to give all credit to Burgess Meredith and what I consider the Citizen Kane of Twilight Zone episodes.
Yeah.
At last.
I know that episode where his glasses break. Yeah. That was your inspiration, huh?
Inspiration.
That's great. I have to ask you about this incredible cast you're all nominated for SAG with. And, it's putting together a cast like this or anything is amazing. You all seem to come in with the same idea for Adam McKay and for what this movie was saying. What was it like working with all those actors? You mentioned Meryl Streep, but there's many more.
Well, look, I mean, when do you get to work with a cast of this magnitude? Everyone was excited, but the reflecting back on working on this film at the height of COVID, what was truly astounding was not only was there an incredible amount of improvisation, and Adam allowed this atmosphere where literally anything goes. And sometimes, we'll be sitting in the White House and thanks to our amazing improvisational actor, Jonah Hill, the narrative would go off into the stratosphere and we'd have to pull it back and bob and weave and try to get back on course with what the movie was about. But what I really admired watching from all these actors was a situation in which we didn't really have a rehearsal period. All conversations kind of happened over Zoom. So many of these actors were thrust into the reality of the situation, had to create their character with a certain amount of spontaneity and flexibility. People like Mark Rylance, it was just a revelation to be able to watch him with all the tools that he has and all of his theatrical experience and film experience, literally create that character in front of us. I mean, Meryl Streep and I were absolutely giddy watching him pull out the different tools that he had and then finally nail the scene at the end of the day and say, I think we got it. And we're like completely awestruck, but everybody had to come into sort of this gauntlet of separation where, it was unlike anything anyone has ever experienced before, I think. I mean, even Meryl articulated that in a lot of ways. She had to come and be president day one with all of us. And so Adam really set up the perfect atmosphere for all of us to literally try anything we wanted. But of course, the mastery of that is keeping on message. And we got to hear this sort of voice of God constantly because he was always in the other room with 5 layers of plastic protection, but guiding all of us as to, what he wanted this movie to focus on. And yeah, like I said, art imitated life to such a degree while we're making this movie. And so many things that we thought were, maybe too much of an extreme parody as the film was unfolding and his life was unfolding, really became much closer to the truth of the reality that we were living in.
We don't see it as much anymore. We don't see filmmakers on that level, but how do you know, Adam, when to stop and when to keep it real? Because this kept so real, and that's what makes it really work.
Well, that's where, the whole challenge of this movie was tone. Like Leo said, we're filming during a 1 every 100-year global pandemic, and then we're filming during an attack on the Capitol for people literally trying to overthrow an election. And then we're seeing, and at the same time, the whole motivation for the movie was the fact that we're staring down the greatest challenge in human history, the climate crisis, with no action being taken, big oil money running over governments around the world. So it was like surfing the craziest wave. And by the way, I don't surf at all. I don't know why I chose that analogy, but it just was bumpy. It was really bumpy. And we constantly had to adjust tone in the filming, in the editing. You were constantly feeling this choppy feeling with the movie. But Leo and I knew, and we talked about it during the process, and Jen Lawrence and Rob Morgan and everyone knew that if you didn't keep a toe in reality, much like the real world, you'd lose everything. So that the constant game was to keep the stakes, to be artful and emotional while being as absurd as reality really is. And that was a big thing with this movie, was that the reality we're living in is like an over-the-top comedy, but also like an Aronofsky drama, but also like a dry satire, but also like a Mike Judge film. And so we made a choice that we're going to blend those tones. And some people can go with that, some people can't. But to represent the world we're living in right now, we had to dive into that. And we were lucky that we had one of the most brilliant editors ever, Hank Corwin, and one of the great composers, Nick Bertel, who I would openly laugh at. And I would say, like, well, we gave you quite a challenge here. Find the music for this. Find the cut pattern for this. So yeah, I've never had any experience like this. And we've done some challenging films in the past, but God bless Leo and these actors for finding that split, because it was all in the performance. You could see Leo do it throughout the movie, and this cast constantly keep an emotional toe in the water while at the same time playing the absurdity. Almost impossible to do two things at once like that.
I'm curious what kind of reactions you've gotten to the film now that it's seen globally and people are seeing this in these kind of huge numbers. Leo, I can't imagine the numbers that are watching this on Netflix that they're reporting back, for any movie that you may have ever been involved with. I mean, that's what streaming can do globally right as it opens.
In a lot of ways, it's, we're very lucky that, it's engaged with so many audiences. And I don't think that would have happened without it being on Netflix at this particular, that's not an advertisement for Netflix, but in a lot of ways, at this particular moment in history, there's this, as I said before, there's this global anxiety that we all feel about this issue, post-pandemic, connected to the climate crisis of what we're doing to really solve this issue and why science has become politicized in the way that it has. So, I'm going to spare you the specific reactions that I've had, but yes, more so than normal, I've really felt an honest connectivity with people that have seen this movie, and really, brought out a lot of frustrations that people have with how we're solving these issues as a world community. And that, like I said, it's so rare to be at these lightning rod moments. And I said this many times with Adam before, you never really know when you're attempting to do a movie like this, whether it can actually manifest any sort of change. But to even have a dialogue and a conversation and have people make that specific climate connection and the COVID connection, having seen the movie and getting all the complexity. I mean, this is a big thing to sort of take on subject-wise, and it's quite ballsy of Adam to have done it in the height of COVID, even though he started this before it all happened. But forget about what wins what award or anything. It doesn't. At this point, if we made people start to talk about this issue, that's something I'm incredibly proud of.
That's the win for sure. No matter what happens awards-wise, I'm sure Adam, you'd agree. I'm curious on your reactions, because they haven't all been positive. There are people who don't get it.
I mean, it's been really interesting. I mean, we knew what we were doing. We knew we were making a movie that was going to try and capture this feeling that we have right now of being overwhelmed, bombarded, confused, distracted, while there's a clear danger coming towards us. Whether that clear danger is COVID, the climate crisis, which I think is literally 1,000 times bigger or 1,000,000 times bigger than any other danger, or where American democracy is right now and democracies across the world. We're living in this incredibly tenuous time where people are seeing it from 1,000 different perspectives. Everyone's experiencing it very differently. I have friends who are just flat out freaked out. I have friends that are kind of shutting it down and don't want to talk about it. And the reactions have really mirrored that diversity of experiences. So, you know, to see the critics almost exactly 50-50 divided is kind of perfect. I mean, that's like, they almost should be. And to see my friends, like I've had people come to me in tears. We had one person who watched the movie who backed her car into a pole afterwards because she was so emotional. Then we've had people that just laugh. Like, you can tell people just need to laugh because goddamn, we haven't gotten a laugh in the last 5 or 10 years. It feels like I've never, ever been involved in a movie that has had this diversity of responses. And if you look at the world we're living in right now, it makes perfect sense. So, you know, my kind of statement to people, whether they love it, hate it, or in between, is like, yes, those are all valid responses because that's kind of where we're in the world right now. But ultimately, Leo's right. I mean, the most encouraging, heartening thing has been seeing, I can't believe we made a comedy where it was #1 for Netflix in like 87 countries. I have never, comedy usually doesn't do that. You don't see a comedy be #1 in like Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Reunion Island, the Ukraine, the US, and it really points to what Leo was talking about. We're all feeling this global anxiety right now. And for the audience reaction, I felt it very heartening that there was a universal experience out there during a time where it feels so divided. So that was really like almost emotional for me to see that kind of reaction from the world.
That's really quite amazing. You know, when he mentioned comedy, Leo, I have to ask you again. You've done comedy. You haven't done a whole lot of comedy, and I don't think you're doing comedy here. You are playing this character very straight and very real. I didn't feel a moment like, you know, you're playing comedy. You're playing the character. I'm wondering what that's like. Your process here. We have a lot of actors watching here.
Well, I knew that this character, there, you know, we needed to have a couple anchors in this film. You know, we needed to have a couple anchors that
is correct.
brought it back to the truth of you know, the complete Armageddon and the severity of an issue like that. So, as much as we were in the scene, and I was watching, you know, not only Jonah but Meryl take their characters in these unbelievably delicious directions, I knew, you know, my character had to be by the book. We had to get back to the seriousness and severity of the issue. And so, yeah, I played hard into that because, you know, in a lot of ways, he is representative, and so is Kate, of scientific facts, and they're not always, you know, they're not always as colorful as people want them to be. They're not always as engaging or you know, polarizing. They don't get the likes or the clicks, but they're telling us the truth. So that was my anchor for the character.
But
can I brag on Leo a little bit here?
Yeah.
He's being very humble. I mean, you know, we've seen what Leo's done. We've seen the movies he's been in. He's worked with some of the grand masters like Scorsese and Tarantino. And he came into this movie and he's playing a schlubby Midwestern third-tier professor with a panic disorder. And I just and by the way, Leo's also going to be humble about it. He has some of the greatest comic instincts. And as someone who's done comedy for a long time, what he's saying is correct. Like, you have to be the emotional base, but the emotional base for comedy is the trickiest part of comedy to play. So I just marveled at him having that panic attack in the bathroom, having like being overwhelmed by Kate Blanchett's character, Briavante, and the selflessness of him, and yet also the compass of him to know what this role required. I was blown away, and Hank Corwin, my editor, said the same thing, like, holy cow, I didn't know that he had this pitch in his arsenal. We've seen Leo be hilarious, obviously, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Wolf of Wall Street. We know he can do that. But crap, man, to play the emotional bass, I mean, to be Griffin Dunn in After Hours, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, and at the same time to bring that anxiety in for the whole world, because this movie wasn't just about downtown New York in the 80s, it's about the whole planet. I was floored by his performance. I really was.
Oh, thank you, Adam. Thanks.
Yeah, you know, there's so many individual scenes. I watched this WGA conversation that Adam did with David O. Russell. You were talking about the scene at the White House where they're just waiting in the hall to get in to see the president, and he wanted that to go on for an hour. What, playing that and having that guy come and charge you for the snacks and all of that was so fun. And the way it was played was almost deadpan, the way you're looking at each other. And then Jonah comes out and goes, "I'm sorry, not tonight." It's just so cool. What's it like to play those scenes? How do you work that out? Do you have much rehearsal time, or do you just go?
Very little, but it was really about just putting, like I said before, it's about putting ourselves in the moment. And yeah, as you were talking about, I was just thinking about how ridiculous it is and how probably true it must be to be sitting there trying to articulate that the end of the world is happening, and then you're sitting in a hallway waiting for the president to take a meeting to listen to this catastrophic information. And in a lot of ways it just felt incredibly real. And even getting in that massive cargo ship and the anxiety that all these people must feel, knowing that they're the messengers of the apocalypse. This movie was so amazing to do because we didn't know what a lot of these scenarios would be like, and there was no rehearsal. We were just thrown onto these, disinfected sets and forced to react to our surroundings and these insane characters that we had to, interact with.
I mean, it was crazy when they were doing that scene, because Leo's right. We did some Zoom rehearsals, which actually worked better than I thought they would. They helped a little bit. But still, the first time you're walking on these sets because of COVID is when you're walking on the set. And the whole trick was just, we've got time. So all credit to our producers, Kevin Messick, Jeff Waxman, Jen Madaloff. They knew this was insane. And I gotta say, and once again, not to sound like an advertisement, but man, Netflix stepped up. I mean, they just gave us tons of safety and pad, and without that, we couldn't have done it. I mean, if we were operating on a run and gun style, but you're right. The scene where they're waiting in the hallway, when we were filming it, I was like, oh, I could do a whole movie where it's two people waiting in a hallway to say the world's going to end, and that's the entire movie. So my poor editor, I told Hank, I mean, we had a cut of that was 3 times longer. And it just pulverized the people that were watching it in the screening. And I was cackling like a goon in the back of the theater. So, yeah, I mean, like we said earlier, tone was so key with this. Finding that middle ground with an audience. We live in a crazy world where, regardless of your political leanings, the president of the United States actually floated the idea of ingesting bleach. How do you do comedy in that world? How do you do emotion? How do you do story in that world? I keep saying it. It's like no experience I've ever even come close to.
Turning out these movies that mean something, both of you. You're both to be admired for putting your weight behind real issues that matter as well.
Thank you for your time. And by the way, on that note, Adam, I got some more documentary and climate stuff I want to talk to you about. So let's
Leo and I are talking. We're talking about several projects that. We're going to keep doing this stuff for sure. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for everyone that watched. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.